All right, so let's get this thing started. My name is Tukker, and I'm a concept artist. So primarily, you see here like a couple of 2D images, and you might be wondering like, what's that guy doing on a Maxon stage, giving a 3D talk? Well, basically, what I do is in my day-to-day workflow, I make use of a lot of 3D to create my images. And today, I just wanted to show you, I want to take you through a day of my workflow. So that's what we're going to do. So my clients, they include Paramount Pictures, as well as their theme park department. I do a lot of personal stuff. I work for Paizo, kind of a board game company. I do a lot of work for science fiction writers. This was an image made for X Prize. That's an organization organizing very innovative competitions. And they required me to make an artwork based on kind of a sci-fi story they had written. More experimental stuff. This was for a contest on ArtStation. And more contest stuff. And this was also for a contest. I really like contests because you can win stuff. All right, so in my day-to-day workflow, I make use of Cinema 4D, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here. Octane Render, a very nice rendering plugin for Cinema 4D. Very nice pipeline between those two. X Particles, of course, the Insidium guys are also here. Probably they can tell you a lot more than I can, but I will show you maybe the basics, and I will show you how I would use X Particles to create geometry. And Photoshop, of course, for the paintings. So you see this little thumbnail, that's the final artwork, and then we have the 3D base on the rest of the screen. So what I do is in Cinema 4D, I kind of use it like a box of Legos. I just use all of the tools available to me to create a nice base for me to work from. And then I would take it into Photoshop and paint over it and take it into a finished product, basically. Because for me, I'm not a 3D animator, I'm not a filmmaker of some sort. So for me, the 2D image is always the final result. Because as a concept artist, you tend to make designs that other people will bring into life or bring into reality. So here's the 3D base already. There's already so much information I could use from this start. And you can see here that most of the information I made in 3D is still intact in the final image. Here's some experiments, some sketches. What I usually do is when I work in 3D, I just send those work in progresses to clients because Cinema 4D and 3D allows me to create very quick renders, some nice camera angles. I can then show them to the clients and show them like, oh, this is what the scale would be like. This is the basic look. I don't know, there's some waves going on, and the client would be like, okay, yeah, maybe let's go for this one or this one, doesn't matter. It's all about giving the client a lot of possibilities to work from. And 3D allows you to do that because you just press render, since your scene is already done. You just press render, get a cup of coffee, take a jog or something if you're into that. Yeah, so here's some more. And I think we can also almost jump into my day of work. Here's that very big snow vehicle. This took a little longer to make in 3D, but nonetheless, it was a lot of fun, of course. All right, so that's a very short presentation, because now I would love to show you, basically my day-to-day process. And what I did, I took 4 hours off from work, and I just recorded everything I did. And the idea was to make an image from start to finish, and kind of show you guys what the image would look like in the end. And this is the end result. So you see it's kind of a city on an asteroid flying stuff. I based it on the Disney's movie Treasure Planet, where there was no gravity, but the air was breathable. I based it on that concept. And then I also based the mood on a fellow artist who was also presenting here, Bastien Grivet. So that's what I've been doing. And now I'm going to take you through the whole process. And I probably need to speed it up since it's 4 hours of video. So we're going to speed it up just a little bit. And because this is all basic stuff, but what I'm doing here, I'm creating a particle system. And yeah, for some of you guys who don't know X-Particles is a software you use to create giant particle systems, create dust clouds, create storms. You can create everything, even fluids. But I use it in a very experimental way. So what I do, I am creating a particle system, and then I'm going to connect all of the particles to create kind of a rock structure. So if we speed through this, we can see what happens. All right, I have to keep my time in check, otherwise I will just keep rambling on. What I will also do, by the way, during this video is I will probably jump into Cinema 4D once in a while to maybe go more in depth on the tools I'm using. For example, the MoGraph tool, the cloners, and I will show some displacement maps as well. Because as a 2D artist, you might be thinking, what am I going to do in 3D? It's all technical stuff. Like, that's way too hard for me. But you can actually use your 2D skills and apply them to the 3D program. So when we're looking at the screen, you can see that I am already making kind of the asteroid base. And what I'm doing now is I'm making a couple of connections between the polygons, and I'm turning that into a geometry as well. So you can see here, those could also almost be metal rods connecting the whole asteroid together and kind of keeping the whole thing in place. All right. So what I do, since I'm a concept artist, I'm not a technical guy at all, so I tend to just use every tool available to me and just press buttons until I find something I like and that looks pleasing to me. But this software, of course, like Cinema 4D, also allows you to search for shapes. So especially if you don't have inspiration, you can just start pushing and pulling shapes until there's something you find, like a shape that looks visually pleasing to you or tells you something or has a nice silhouette, for example. And so you can actually design stuff while you're playing around in Cinema 4D. So I don't have to use my sketchbook to make super detailed watercolor sketches first. I can just start in Cinema 4D. So I don't really sketch anymore. If you would ask me, oh, Leon, can you please draw us a car? I would be like, no. Because, I got so used to playing with 3D that I kind of lost the skill to draw. But I still paint, of course, in Photoshop. All right. So here we have the first structure. And let's jump into the second video, where I'm going to populate the structure with some buildings. I'm making a cylinder here. And I will be using the brush tool to kind of displace the geometry a little bit. But at first, I'm putting it into a cloner. And I will jump into Cinema 4D in a minute to show that a little bit more in depth because we have a lot of time. But you can see I'm using the brush tool to kind of deform the shape a bit. So, and since it's being put in a cloner, the copies automatically change as well. So let's put it on pause right here, jump into Cinema 4D and show you what I mean. So if I would zoom in a little, and if I would make a cube, give it a couple of segments, we don't need too much, and make it editable. And then I'll just start pushing and pulling some shapes. It doesn't need to be accurate. All right, and let's go to extrude inner, select the loop, and try and make some windows, since I will be trying to make a building. Okay, so now we have one Lego brick, so to say, and now we're going to copy it all over the place. All right, so let me put it into a cloner. You already see that the count is on 3, and we can put it on whatever we want. So let's put it on 18. But you can also alter the rotation. So with every step, the model rotates 5%. And I could also alter the scale. So let's put this lower. And now we already have, kind of an interesting building going on. Now I'll just copy the cloner, maybe deform the object a little bit, maybe make it a bit bigger. And then alter some stuff here. Make this a bit lower. It's all about experimenting. And at this point, I also don't have to worry about polygons or how heavy the model is, since I'm not animating everything. For me, the final product is just the 2D image. So I can go as much overboard as I want, basically. All right, so this can already be kind of a building. Let's connect this. I tend to work very destructively, by the way. Yeah, like I said, since I don't have to worry about topology or anything. What we could do now is if I, for example, if this would be a ruin, I can add a poly effects tool and change or alter all the individual polygons. So I can say every polygon is only 90% of what it used to be, for example. So everything gets a little bit smaller. What I can also do, and here is where the 2D thing comes in handy, I can add a shader deformer and add a shader to it. And then I'll jump into my... Oh wait, let's do it with one of the native Cinema 4D options, the noise shader, for example. Let's put the scale way up, the contrast way up. So you see now some parts of the building don't show and some parts do show based on the black and white values of the shader. And what I could also do, if the building would be only be partially destroyed, I can add a fall off to this and very accurately tell where the destruction should be. So if it should only be on the top, I can put it right here, for example. I can copy it and add it to the poly effects and add another broken piece. So this is how I tend to experiment with my with Cinema 4D, of course. All right, let's put this into a group and save it for later, because we can just continue in this later during this talk. All right, let's jump back into our video. Let's speed it up a little bit, because this is very straightforward what's happening right now. What I'm doing, I'm making the cloner. It's kind of Zaha Hadid. I'm not sure if some of you guys know her. A very famous architect, sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But she used very kind of fluid shapes, like with soft edges and stuff like that. I really love that look. So that's what I'm trying to go for. I'm trying to create a pirate city, but it used to be something way more clean. So what I'm doing, I'm creating buildings that once looked very, I don't know, pristine and maybe rich, and now I'm just destroying it. I'm just deleting polygons and copying it all over the asteroid structure we have here. All right. Yeah, and like I said, I could also use the poly effects to have a little bit more control over my destruction, but I could also, of course, just select some polygons, bam, delete it, and we're done. All right, let's speed this up way more, because this is all straightforward. So we have some time to do a little bit more of a live demo. All right, still copying the buildings. And then if this video is done, we'll jump back into the image and see where we are right now. All right. So, and this was, I think, about 10 minutes in total. The total process took about 4 hours from start to finish. And if you look at the building, you can see there's almost nothing of that basic model left. But if you look here, you can still see some of the basic shapes that we were making just now. And maybe here as well. So what I try to do, I use my 3D base as a reference, and I just start painting over it. But I don't try to hide everything, because 3D provides you with so much information to work from. So it would basically be a waste of time to just throw the whole 3D thing away, right? Okay, all right. And this is super easy, I think. This is just your regular box modeling. I'm trying to model some kind of radio tower to throw into the building, as if the pirates wanted to make, I don't know, maybe a communication center, for example. So this will be a fast one. Yeah, you see here, still being very destructive. Still just copying, pushing and pulling shapes, don't caring at all about the polygon count. But because Cinema 4D has such a nice interface and it's so easy to use, it allows me to just quickly go everywhere and make the building in a matter of minutes. Yeah, use the cloner again to make the little clone part at the top. I'm just copying the building again, make it bigger. So I try to reuse every element I make. So what I'm doing is I'm not using a box of Legos, I'm creating my own box of Legos, right? And that's the fun part. I don't really like to use 3D models that you can buy from the internet, for example. I just like to basically build my own kit. And also, I was just talking about how I can't draw anymore. I also can't really model cars, for example. If you would ask me to model a nice truck or a T-Rex, I would be like, nah, I can just use maybe a photo for that and do it in Photoshop, for example. So yeah, it's all about the final image. And as a concept artist, of course, time is money, sadly. So you have to work with the tools available and work as fast as you can. But then 3D gives me so much information because I don't have to worry about lighting anymore, since I can just make an artificial light in 3D. And since it's based on math, it automatically calculates the shadows. And I also don't have to worry about my composition anymore. I can just grab a very nice camera angle, because the Cinema 4D camera mimics real-life cameras. So I can just pick whatever I like, and yeah, turn it into a final model for me to work from. And as you can see here, the model is still very flat because there are no textures. But I will do that later. And you will see my process for texturing is even more dirty than what I'm doing right here. So here I want my building to have a little bit more detail, so I'm just pushing and pulling shapes. Yeah, and you can also see this is the Octane Live Viewer. What that does, it's a GPU-based render system, and it basically gives me live feedback on what I'm doing. So I can already see, almost in an instant, what my final model looks like right now. Of course, with the final render, you can make the quality a lot bigger. But yeah, you can see what I mean. All right, so still deleting stuff, adding a little sphere. It's just a basic shape. Because if you are a concept artist or a designer, you tend to dissect everything in just basic shapes, squares, triangles, and spheres or circles. And when you have that knowledge, or when you're trained or something, you can use all those basic shapes to create something very, very detailed. But sometimes you don't really need more than a sphere to give your audience the impression what you're trying to go for. Because, for example, I just put a sphere on top here, and it could be a radar or something. It's all about the story you want to tell to your audience. All right, and let's jump to a little tool that's a little bit more specific for Octane. But of course, Cinema 4D itself, you can also do this with cloners. But this is a tool that is called the Octane Scatter tool. And what I'm doing right here, we can run through this. I'm just creating a couple of very ugly and very quick buildings. Because what I'll be doing after, I will copy those buildings all over my asteroid to give the impression of a city. So I just have to make a couple of models, and I can copy them all over within a matter of a few clicks. So you can see here, I'm using the brush tool again to deform my structures a little bit, trying to create interesting buildings. Little silo. All right, that was fast. All right, let's slow it down here. Because now I just copied all of my models into the 3D scene. And I will... Oh yeah, and I also copied the surface of the asteroid. So I copied a bit of the top part of the asteroid, because that's going to be my source. That is where the clones are going to be thrown upon. And here you can see this is what happens when I just regularly smash them in there. They're way too big. It looks like a giant mess. But I only have to rescale them down to make it look much more convincing. You can still see though that some of these towers are flying. And that's not what we want, so I'll probably end up deleting them. And oops, let me drag this one out of the way. What I can also do, because because Octane Scatter works very well with Cinema 4D, I can use the noise shader, for example, to figure out where my buildings are supposed to be. So based on a black and white texture, the buildings will either be very small or very big, or don't show at all. So if the part of the texture is black, the building doesn't show, and if it's white, it will be shown on the maximum size. So here I'm just figuring out what the best count would be for building. So I'm trying 500 here. It's not dense enough for me, so I'm trying 1,000. It's all a matter of pushing buttons, see what happens. And because Octane, the Octane live viewer gives me instant feedback on what I'm doing, I can instantly see what what button I pushed, and if it didn't blow up my PC or Mac, whatever you're using. All right. So now I'm altering the rotation a little bit to make the whole city look a little bit more messy, because I wanted it. Because when you're making an image, you want to tell a story. And with something as simple as just rotating the buildings, you can give the impression to your audience that someone didn't really care about the whole logistics of the place. So basically, the buildings were just stacked on top of one another. And it could also imply that the city is a bit poor, for example. All right, so that's what the Octane Scatter does. And let's just run through this. Sadly, I don't have Octane installed on my MacBook here, so I can't show that live. But what Octane does, is a GPU render. So based on your video card, it will give you faster or slower results. But that's all. That's not important. So here I'm trying to create a couple of little spaceships, and I'm quickly figuring out my Z-depth pass. And I'll come back to that later. Z-depth pass, I can use that for my Photoshop image to generate depth. All right, let's see what happens here. We can rush through this because this is just another example for the scatter tool. You can see me here. I'm trying to create another village, but that was just a little extra. But this is just located on a small plane. And after that, I will probably put it on a cube as well and see what kind of results we have. And you see that here, just with the push of a couple of buttons, you can instantly change the entire look and feel of your little town. And because I created like 20 separate buildings, it tends to look kind of unique as well. And here I just threw it on top of a cube, and you instantly get one of these Star Trek Borg cubes, for example. All right, and this is a simple one as well. Here I modeled the little boats, because if we go back to the image, just for a quick reference to see what we already did. All right, you can see here all of the rocks, for example, they all started in 3D. And this ship, for example, is also made in 3D. And I will show that momentarily. And I think if we have some time left in the end, I will show the painting process as well. So how I would approach painting over the entire model. All right, where's this video? There you go, boat. And I will do this fast because it's again a very straightforward modeling process. Just box modeling, pushing and pulling shapes. You know, I'm trying to create a little mast. I made a little cabin already, and then after that I will try and create the shape of the boat as well. And it doesn't have to look convincing at all for me because I will paint over it anyway. I can make it look more realistic in Photoshop. But 3D allows me to have a very quick effect and very quick results in a matter of an hour, because the entire modeling process took about an hour and a half. So from nothing to the finished pirate base, so to say. So this looks ugly. I know. For you 3D modelers out there will probably think, what's this guy doing? But now I wanted it to have a more futuristic look. So I'm just creating ribbons of geometry, and I'm putting them in a symmetry. Symmetry? I mean symmetry. Symmetry would be weird. All right. And with the brush tool, I'm just pushing and pulling the polygons to create kind of a nice sci-fi boat effect. I wanted it to have just kind of an alien look. And I'm just pushing and pulling, I'm just copying the shapes around. And you can see here, they are all put into a symmetry object. So that means if I would alter one side, the other side automatically mirrors it. So tools like that are very, very easy to use in this software. All right, I think we're almost done with the boat. Maybe we can go a little bit faster. so we have a bit time left in the end. Because last Thursday I had to do this talk as well, but I talked way too fast. And I was basically done in half an hour. So I'm trying to go a little bit more in depth on all the features Cinema 4D has to offer, especially for a guy who is not a 3D artist like me and basically doesn't know anything about the whole technical stuff. So another little mast and some exhaust. Of course, it's a space boat, so you have to have nice nuclear thrusters or something. And right, and let's hit regular speed. And now I'm just trying to find a nice composition. Because since my final result is, of course, a 2D image, I have to find a nice balance between elements. So this ship is pointing towards the tower, and it already creates a nice composition to work from. And also, for scale reasons, I decided to copy the boat like back into 3D space. To give the audience or give the viewer, someone who is looking at the image, to give them more of a, I don't know, a sense of 3D. Because if you have this boat here and the same boat is located over there, but it's smaller, your eye automatically recognizes it as being farther away in space. All right. Cool. And I had a couple of more videos, the whole texturing bit. Let's see where it is. It's probably in a separate folder. Oh wait, it's right here. Texturing and lighting. Because I could already render the 3D thing we had out and just paint over that, but I decided to go just a little bit farther because, of course, if I would put a couple of textures on my 3D model, it gives me infinitely more information to work from. So what I'm doing here, and again, for you guys who are very technical or guys who like details, this probably looks horrible. But what I'm doing right now is I'm creating a texture, a tileable texture, that I can then throw onto my 3D model to generate some more detail. So just a couple of buildings I found, or even bought, I think, on the internet, a couple of reference packs. And now I'm just painting over it to generate a little bit more of a painterly effect. And I'm also trying to connect all of the buildings together just a little bit. All right, but this is not too important, so let's just speed it up. Using a couple of brushes to generate a bit more noise. And now I'm trying to make the texture tileable. And here's a kind of a rock texture I'm using to define the rocks. And I'm also turning it into a black and white map, because that's something I want to dive into just a little bit later. I'm turning this into a displacement map. And a displacement map kind of pushes and pulls your polygons based on the black and white values in the image you put in. All right, so at first I think I'm going to throw the texture on top of the model. And then we'll dive into 3D to look at some more of the displacement stuff. So again, very straightforward. I don't use, what's that even called? Well, never mind. UV unwrapped. Man, you know, I'm not even technical enough to know that word. For you 3D guys out there, also on the live stream, I'm very sorry. I humbly apologize. But for me, this provides me with enough information because, again, it's all about time. Try and get a result as fast as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect because we can hide our mistakes when we're turning this into a final image. All right, so I'm just applying the textures. I already applied the rock texture as well. And if we would see what the render looks like right now, I think we have a couple of steps maybe here. It's in a different folder, doesn't matter. Let me open up Cinema 4D and see what I meant with the displacement maps, because this is honestly my favorite tool in the world, because it allows me to basically throw 2D images in, which I've created in Photoshop, and use them to generate geometry. And for me, it's perfect because I can kind of create a city in a matter of seconds. So let me jump into the displacer here, add it to our model, and go to shading. And then I made a couple of these displacement maps in Photoshop. So let's just pick a cool one, maybe this one, a fairly simple. And you can already see that the polygons, they're starting to be some difference in the height. All right, and if I would put the displacer way higher, now we instantly have a couple of buildings. And I'd say that's pretty cool. And now I'll just apply this displacer, because like I said, I work in a very destructive way. I'm throwing a polygon reduction on it. By the way, the new Cinema 4D release has a very much improved polygon reduction option, because I saw it with your live stream, Jonas, how crazily good it is right now. But basically, the polygon reduction options just reduces my polygons, because if I want to apply a displacer on my geometry, it requires me to have a lot of polygons, otherwise there would be nothing to displace, right? All right, and now let's turn this into a little town very quickly. And we can also, for example, just copy this bit, copy it, invert the selection, and now we have a separate building. And yeah, we can start populate a little city within a matter of minutes. And that's really nice. And also, if you would just apply a light with a cool shadow, it already gives me enough information to work from in Cinema 4D. So if I would hit render, bear with me because my laptop is very old, but it will render in a couple of seconds. All right, so you can already see what happened. The building looks pretty detailed because of the polygon effects. Because every polygon is just a little bit smaller, it gives the impression that there's a lot of detail in the building, and also that it's kind of destroyed. There are a lot of holes in it. And now it would only be a matter of texturing it, and I could even just throw this into Photoshop and start painting over it. If I have to deliver a sketch in an hour, I can just use this information, because sometimes you have to work very fast in order to keep your clients happy. Cool, let's jump back into the video, because I was applying some textures, I believe, back in that time. All right, I'm also putting in a light, because of course we need kind of a sun in order to make our scene look a bit realistic. And if I have that light, if I add the light in Cinema 4D, I then, in Photoshop, when I'm looking at it, I already know where the sun is coming from. So I can base all of my lighting choices, I can base that on where the light was in Cinema 4D. So now what I'm doing, I'm creating a little emissive texture, which basically is a texture that, I don't know, it's a light surface, so to say. So it gives off light, and it also lights the rest of your object. And I'm just applying that to the exhausts of the ship. And what I'm doing now is, let me jump back just a little bit. I'm also making another emissive texture because I wanted some of the buildings to have little lights in them. I wanted to give the impression of little windows. So what I'm doing, let's scroll ahead. All right, I'm copying the texture, and then with the opacity, I'm putting in a black and white folder. A black and white texture of those lights. And what happens now is that whenever I would apply this texture, everything that was black in the opacity map doesn't show. So in that way, I can just apply a little light texture as well. And if I would throw that on top of a couple of models, it would just show that like a couple of windows have lights behind them. What am I doing here? Some more details. Below the base of the tower, I wanted some local lights there to generate a point of interest. Because it's all about composition when you're making an environment design. Because I typically, when I work in the industry, I typically work as an environment artist. So what I'm doing is I sketch out locations, I figure out worlds. I try to tell stories with, kind of with an environment painting, basically. And that's my job. And also, I can't really draw characters because, I don't know, I haven't really got into it yet. And environments, I like them a lot more. They come more natural to me. So, and you can see here, I jumped into my Octane Scatter tool. That's the tool that, like it says, it scatters my buildings on top of the asteroid. And on some of the objects, I apply that little window light texture, and I just throw it on top of the model. And now if we zoom out, you can see that some of the buildings, they have lights in them. So that's a very nice way. Since the scatter randomly scatters your objects over like on top of the geometry, it gives the impression that some buildings have lights in them, and some don't. Now I'm jumping into Photoshop again to change the textures a bit, because I thought they were too purple. So I turned them into a little bit more of a warm color. But I think we're almost done here. Nice. We have about 10-15 minutes left, so that's, I think, plenty of time to show what I want to show. Let's skip over this. Yeah, just copying a couple of the rocks. Yeah, because all of the process you see now is just me trying to figure out stuff. So if you see random things appearing and then disappearing, it's because I changed my mind. Cool. That was it. All right, so that actually was the whole modeling process. And this is what the model looked like in the end. So the back of the image is white because it's a transparent background, because I will add the background in Photoshop later, because I will paint over everything. So you can see we have the little boat here. We have our rocks, which previously were very undetailed, but because of the displacement maps, it has so much detail for me to work from. So again, displacement maps kind of morphs and displaces your geometry based on a black and white image you put into Cinema 4D. And it's very nice. It's a very nice tool for me to create some detail without getting too technical about it. So cool. We have the final model. We have a little ship flying up towards the tower. We have a main point of interest, the tower itself. And then what I also did, I rendered a couple of other passes, like the Z-depth pass. And a Z-depth pass gives your model or gives your scene a black and white value based on how far your object is in the back. So my rocks in the back are pure white, and then the foreground rocks are a bit darker. I could then go on and use this as a as a layer mask in Photoshop to instantly generate kind of a fog effect. If I would just brush in some details or some fog and just throw that map onto it, then the fog will apply more on the background rocks than on the foreground rocks, based on the black and white value. So white shows and black doesn't show in terms of color. All right, I also have this is what we call a clown mask, but it's a material ID, which gives your geometry a color based on the texture you have applied to it. And I can use this to very easily make selections within Photoshop to just quickly make selection. If I want to paint a clown behind the ship, I just select it, invert the selection, and I can start painting without the clouds going over the ship. So it's a very handy tool. So the pipeline between 3D and 2D is actually very well defined. All right, so let's go to the final painting again. This is what we got. And now I will jump into the whole painting process, because we still have a couple of minutes left. And this will be super fast because I just sped it up, since this talk is about 3D, of course. But I just wanted to show you how I would then progress and use all of the information that the 3D base gave me, like Cinema 4D's 3D base. And I would then, how I would use all those details and turn it into a final illustration. So here you can see I'm using that Z-depth mask. I was just altering it a little bit. And I'm probably going to use it later in the painting to either make selections or apply fog to the whole image. All right. So you can see me jumping back and forth between all those layers I made. I mean the renders and my painting to make quick selections. And then after I make a selection, I just use a brush and paint some details in it. Because I like my paintings. I mean, I like my images to have a very painterly quality to it. But I also try to keep the 3D intact. So what you get in the end is a very nice balance between the tight edges that 3D provided and the more soft, brushy strokes going on. All right, we can probably even speed this up because is there anyone of you in the audience who is a 2D artist? I know you are. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. All right. So maybe this is interesting for you guys, but maybe for the 3D guys, it's a little bit like, meh. Can't you do After Effects stuff or something? I don't know. But no, I can't because I'm stupid, and I don't know anything about After Effects. All right. So let's go through this very quickly. Yeah, you can see I'm adding some light. Adding the radar systems, still making selections, kind of making more of a contrast on the building. So I'll make the light values lighter and the dark values darker to generate more of a point of interest. So you can see here, if I would pause, almost, is what I'm going for right now is this should be the focal point. So it's kind of a rule that you should never put your most important feature in the middle of the image, because that looks very symmetrical. Maybe some of you guys are filmmakers, so you already know this. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create kind of an interaction between all of the elements in my painting. So this little ship is flying up towards the tower, and you may be thinking, oh, what's that ship going to do? Are they maybe just traders, or are they going to attack it, for example? Or are they just going home? So it's all about trying to create enough information so the person who views the image can come up with their own stories. So I'm adding a couple of brush strokes, creating some towers, basically detailing the whole image just a little bit more. And let's speed it up. Or maybe skip some steps ahead, since we have some minutes left, and there are still a couple of small things I would like to show. All right. Oh yeah, by the way, you saw the Z depth pass. I'm now using it to generate a bit of fog. And I'm just jumping back and forth between the Z depth pass and the final painting to make some selections and then separate the buildings out from the background, because I want the image to look as if it's going back into space. I want to create some nice overlap by making some value differences. I'm using some photos to use as a silhouette for creating nice antennas, or antennae would be the plural form. And let me skip ahead just a little bit and see what happens. Yeah, here at this step, I already threw some photos on top of the tower to generate more detail, because since this is my focal point, this is what the image is about, the main building. So it should have more detail and more contrast. All right, let's jump ahead a little bit. And then we're almost done. Because yeah, the event is almost over, so I really hope you guys enjoyed IBC, and of course you enjoyed our little Maxon talks. Okay, adding some lights to create some life and show as if it's a man-made structure as opposed to a natural structure. Lights always help. Maybe some waste coming out of the space sewers there. You can just imply anything by just adding a couple of brush strokes. And you can still see, if I zoom in into the image, you can still see a lot of the details that the 3D base provided me. So, for example, here you see still, I was a little bit too late there, but still the texture I used and threw onto my model in 3D, you can still see I'm not really altering that, because it's already enough information to me, and it wouldn't make sense to detail it for weeks and weeks, because of course clients, they want to see progress and they want to throw bags of money at you, or not in most cases. All right, some more clouds. Trying to create a bit more color dynamics as well. Otherwise, the image will look very boring. This is the very classical kind of color combination we all know. Orange and blue works in every movie poster ever. It's very much overused, but because I was recording everything, I tried to go for a more comfortable image, or something that is basically in my comfort zone, so to say. All right. Let's jump ahead just a little bit, see where we are. And then let's, since we're at 45 minutes, let's call this one done. And then I have a little bit of a slideshow showing you all the steps I took to create the final image. So I'm making a few figures on the ship, a couple of dudes, to give a little bit more sense of scale. Because we tend to recognize the shape of humans, because we see them every day. So if you put humans in your scene, you can instantly relate to the whole scene and the whole environment. All right, a couple of more details. And here I'm calling it done. Some color balancing. Some, like a little bit of noise to unify the 3D and the 2D part together. And all right, let's call this one done. And jump into the slideshow, because I had a little bit of a slideshow prepared showing off all the steps. So here's the X particles part. Adding some buildings, figuring out some nice silhouettes. Adding all of the small buildings with the Octane Scatter, like I just showed. Adding the ship. Yeah, figuring out a good camera angle. Adding textures with the displacement map. And then heading into Photoshop and turn everything into a nice and unified painting, into a final image. All right, more details. I'm adding some lights into the buildings using a couple of photo textures on the color dodge layer for you Photoshop guys out there. And that's it, the final image. All right. So that one's done, and I think that the whole talk is almost done, and I want to show maybe a couple of other things that I really like to use when using 3D. Because of course I'm a concept artist, so usually I make 2D images. But since the animation tools are so easy, the MoGraph and animation tools are very easy and straightforward. Let me check this. I had a couple of images here. I can also use 3D to make very quick concept animations. Of course, they're not perfect because I'm not an animator, but you know what I mean. All right. Anyway, this painting was about, it's a city that is slowly being taken over by a robot AI. And what he does, he's trying, over time, he's rebuilding the city using generative design techniques and using his own weird AI brain to create the giant city. And the whole structure itself is all 3D. I didn't really alter anything except for some adjustment layers and some noise. And then all of it that's underneath it is all 2D. So it's all painted within Photoshop. So here I'm trying to create a very nice balance between the cold and hard edges of the 3D model and the nice hand-painted buildings and clouds. All right. But if I would animate this using MoGraph techniques and kind of creating a little timeline, I can create the building and make it appear over time. And I could send this to the clients to show them, like, oh, but this is probably what it could look like in the final game. Maybe you could do it like that. Probably a bit slower because this is way too fast. But yeah, I can use the animation tools, even though I'm not a very technical guy. I don't use 3D in a very technical way, but I can still use the tools that Maxon provides me, that Cinema 4D provides me, to just give my paintings just that little extra thing. Because if it moves, it's cooler, I would say. All right, so the building starts to appear over time. This was made for a contest, by the way. And let's see, do I have anything more? I guess not. All right, I guess that's it, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Also, you guys at home, of course. Thank you so much, Maxon, for having me. I really enjoyed it. And if there are any questions, feel free to feel free to point them out since we have a couple of minutes left. Anyone? No questions? Was it all clear? It wasn't too fast? What kind of what? Hardware. Oh, I'm using this MacBook sometimes, and at home I'm using a PC. Again, I'm not a technical guy. My graphics card is a 1080 GTX, and it's, I don't know. The only thing I know is that it cost me a lot of money, and that I'm now poor. That's all I can tell you about that. So, all right, if there are any more questions, feel free to point them out. And also, if you want to ask them personally, feel free to just walk over to me, I guess. All right, thank you so much, guys.